You give until there's nothing left. Not because you're generous, not because you're kind, but because somewhere, deep in the unexamined places of your psyche, you learn that your worth is measured in how much of yourself you can pour into someone else. You learn that love is not something you deserve to receive. It's something you must earn through exhaustion. You know the pattern intimately. You text back immediately, but you'll wait hours to see if they respond. You rearrange your entire schedule to accommodate their needs, but you'd never dream of asking them to do the same. You memorize their favorite things, their fears, the exact tone of voice they use when they're upset. And you shape yourself around these details, like water filling a container. You become whatever they need you to be. And here's the thing. You're good at it. You're exceptional at reading people, at anticipating needs, at making others feel seen and understood and valued. You've turned devotion into an art form. People tell you you're too nice, too giving, too much. And you smile and shrink a little, because even that criticism feels like evidence that you're not doing it right yet, that you need to try harder. But late at night, when you're alone with yourself, there's this feeling. This quiet, gnawing ache that whispers a question you're terrified to answer. If you stopped performing this love, would anyone stay? If you stopped giving and fixing and anticipating and accommodating, would you still matter? Would you still be worth loving? This is the psychology of overloving. And the cruelest paradox embedded in this pattern is this. The thing you developed to ensure you'd never be abandoned has become the very mechanism that guarantees you'll never truly be known. You perfected the art of love as a transaction, as a performance, as proof of your worth. And in doing so, you exiled your authentic self to a place so deep, even you've forgotten where you buried it. The love you give is real, but it's not free. It's frantic. And underneath all that devotion is a little child, still trying to prove they deserve to stay. Let's be precise about what we're discussing. Overloving is not the same as loving deeply or passionately. It's not about having a big heart or being a caring person. Overloving is a dysregulated attachment behavior, rooted in conditional self-worth. It's what happens when love becomes a compulsion rather than a choice. When you give not from abundance, but from deficit. In attachment theory, this pattern most closely resembles what's called anxious preoccupied attachment. Individuals with this attachment style learned early that love is inconsistent, unpredictable, and must be earned through hypervigilance and performance. The caregiver's availability was conditional. Sometimes present, sometimes absent, never reliably there. So the child developed a strategy. Become indispensable, become so attuned, so giving, so perfect, that abandonment becomes impossible. This is where the concept of relational hypervigilance emerges. Your nervous system learned to constantly scan for signs of disconnection, disapproval, or withdrawal. You developed what psychologists call a protest behavior system, an internal alarm that activates the moment you sense relational threat. And your response? Give more, love harder, prove your worth through devotion. Think of it like this. Imagine your sense of self as a house. In healthy development, that house has a solid foundation, an internal sense of worth that exists, independent of others' approval. But in the overloving pattern, your house was built on sand, on validation from outside. So you spend your entire life frantically shoring up the foundation with other people's acceptance, their need for you, their dependence on you. You mistake being needed for being loved. You confuse enmeshment with intimacy. Dr. Gabor Mate speaks extensively about this in his work on trauma and attachment. He describes how children who grow up in emotionally inconsistent environments learn to abandon themselves, to maintain connection with their caregivers. This is called self-abandonment, the systematic betrayal of your own needs, boundaries, and authenticity in service of someone else's comfort or approval. And here's what's devastating. This pattern literally rewires your brain. Your default mode network, the neural circuitry responsible for self-referential thinking, becomes oriented entirely around others. When you're not actively engaged in a task, your brain doesn't rest or reflect on your own experience. Instead, it obsesses over relationship dynamics. What did they mean by that text? Are they upset? What can I do to fix this? Your internal world becomes a satellite, orbiting someone else's emotional state. This is not love. This is survival, masquerading as devotion. The price you pay for this pattern is yourself. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually, quietly, until one day you look in the mirror and realize you don't know who's looking back at you anymore. You know what everyone else needs, wants, feels, fears. But you've become a stranger to yourself. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the disowned parts of ourselves that we exile because they're deemed unacceptable. But in Overloving, you don't just exile the dark parts. You exile everything that might be inconvenient to the person you're trying to keep. Your anger becomes dangerous, so you bury it. Your needs become burdensome, so you silence them. Your preferences, your boundaries, your dreams, all of it gets sacrificed on the altar of not being too much. And what remains is a performance of a person, a hologram. You become so skilled at mirroring others that you lose the capacity to recognize your own reflection. There's a kind of grief in this that most people don't talk about. It's not the grief of losing someone else. It's the grief of losing yourself, of realizing that somewhere along the way, you made a deal. I will disappear so that you will stay. And for years, decades even, you honored that deal. You kept your end of the bargain. But here's the unbearable truth. They never asked you to disappear. You decided, all on your own, that your authentic presence was too risky. That the real you, with needs and boundaries and the occasional no, was unlovable. So you traded authenticity for acceptance. And you've been paying interest on that trade ever since. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard wrote, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." This is the despair of the overlover. You're so busy being everything to everyone else that you've become nothing to yourself. And the cruelest part, the people you give to often don't even recognize what you're sacrificing. They accept your overgiving because you've trained them to expect it. They take your devotion for granted because you've never shown them that boundaries are possible. You resent them for not appreciating your sacrifice, but you never told them it was a sacrifice in the first place. You just kept giving and giving, waiting for them to notice, to stop you, to tell you that you're enough without all the performance. But they won't, because they can't see what you won't show them. That underneath all that giving is a terrified child, still trying to prove they deserve to be kept. This is the invisible grief of overloving. You mourn a childhood where you should have learned that you were inherently worthy. You mourn relationships where you were too afraid to show up as yourself. You mourn all the times you said yes when you meant no, all the times you stayed quiet when you wanted to scream, all the versions of yourself you abandoned in the desperate hope that someone would finally choose the version you presented instead. So what does this look like in adulthood? How does this childhood wound show up in your everyday life? You might find yourself incapable of receiving. When someone tries to give to you, help you, or show care, you deflect, you minimize. You immediately find a way to give back twice as much, because accepting feels like incurring a debt. Receiving without reciprocating feels dangerous, vulnerable, like proof that you're taking too much. So you become the person who never asks for help, who always insists they're fine, who would rather suffer in silence than risk being perceived as needy. You might become addicted to potential. You don't fall in love with people as they are. You fall in love with who you think you can help them become. You're attracted to broken, unavailable, or emotionally distant people because they give you a job, a purpose, a reason to prove your worth. You convince yourself that if you just love them hard enough, give enough, sacrifice enough, they'll finally become the person who can love you back the way you need. But they never do. Because you didn't choose them, you chose a project. You might struggle with the concept of rest. Doing nothing feels intolerable because your worth is tied to your utility. If you're not actively helping, fixing, giving, or being useful, you feel like you're wasting space. Your self-worth is so dependent on your productivity and service to others that relaxation feels like selfishness. So you stay busy, stay giving, stay needed. Because stillness forces you to confront the emptiness underneath. You might have a pathological fear of disappointing others. The thought of someone being upset with you, frustrated by you, or worst of all, indifferent to you, triggers a full-body panic. So you become a chronic people pleaser, shape-shifting to match what you think others want from you. You lose track of your own opinions, preferences, and boundaries because you're so consumed with managing others' perceptions of you. You might find that your relationships are chronically imbalanced. You're always the one reaching out, planning, remembering, initiating. You tell yourself this is just how you are, thoughtful, caring, proactive. But the truth is, you're terrified of what it would mean if you stopped. If you let the relationship exist on equal footing, would it survive? Or would the other person's lack of effort reveal that they never valued you the way you valued them? You might experience a profound disconnection from your own needs and desires. When someone asks what you want, for dinner, for your birthday, for your future, you genuinely don't know. You've spent so long calibrating yourself to others that your internal compass has gone silent. You know what everyone else wants. But you're a mystery to yourself. You might struggle with endings. When a relationship becomes toxic, one-sided, or emotionally draining, you stay. Not because it's good, not because you're happy, but because leaving feels like admitting defeat. Like proof that you didn't give enough, love enough, try hard enough. So you stay in situations long past their expiration date, convinced that if you just give a little more, things will change. Here's what you need to understand. These are not personality traits. These are coping mechanisms. You are not naturally selfless or just a caring person. You are someone who learned, very early, that your value was conditional. That love had to be earned. That you were only worth keeping if you could prove your utility. And the first step in unlearning this pattern is to stop gaslighting yourself about it. Stop telling yourself that you're just naturally giving, that you don't mind, that it's fine. Start witnessing the pattern for what it is. A survival strategy you developed as a child that no longer serves you as an adult. You have been running a marathon you didn't sign up for, trying to reach a finish line that doesn't exist. And the only way to stop is to finally admit, I'm exhausted. I've been performing love because I didn't believe I was worthy of receiving it. And I can't do this anymore. So how do you heal from this? How do you unlearn a pattern that's been wired into your nervous system since childhood? It starts with the radical act of turning inward. For so long, your attention has been focused outward on others' needs, others' emotions, others' approval. Healing requires you to redirect that attention back to yourself. To ask, perhaps for the first time in your life, what do I need? What do I want? What do I feel? This is the work of inner child reparenting. You must become the caregiver to yourself that you needed but didn't receive. You must learn to hold yourself with the same tenderness, patience, and unconditional acceptance that you've been giving away to others. This means meeting your own needs without guilt, setting boundaries without apologizing, saying no without over-explaining. It also requires engaging in what Jungian psychology calls shadow work, the process of reclaiming the disowned parts of yourself. Your anger is not bad, your needs are not selfish, your boundaries are not mean. These parts of you were exiled because you believed they made you unlovable. But the truth is, they make you human. And learning to integrate them, to let yourself be angry, needy, boundaried, and imperfect, is how you become whole. One of the most powerful practices is learning to choose softness over performance. This means allowing yourself to be loved without earning it, to receive help without immediately reciprocating, to exist in relationships without constantly proving your worth. It means trusting that you are enough, exactly as you are, without the performance. You must also grieve. Grieve the childhood you didn't have. Grieve the relationships where you abandoned yourself. Grieve the years you spent believing you had to be useful to be loved. This grief is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's your psyche acknowledging the truth of what happened, and finally, letting it be. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage." Your overloving, this desperate, exhausting pattern, is not your enemy. It's a part of you that's been trying to protect you, to keep you safe, to ensure you're never abandoned again. And it deserves your compassion. But it also deserves to retire. Because you are no longer the powerless child who had to earn the right to stay. Healing doesn't mean you stop loving deeply. It means you stop using love as currency. It means you learn that your worth is not contingent on how much you give, how useful you are, or how little space you take up. It means you finally understand that real love, the kind that nourishes rather than depletes, begins with loving yourself enough to stop abandoning yourself for others. You are not too much. You were never too much. You were just trying to survive in a world that made you feel like you had to earn the right to exist. But you don't. You are inherently, unconditionally, undeniably worthy. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. The goal is not to be fixed. The goal is to be whole. To integrate all the parts of yourself, the giving and the receiving, the soft and the boundaried, the selfless and the self-honoring, into one complete, authentic person. That's the journey. And if this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of deep psychological exploration. And most importantly, go gently with yourself. You've been carrying this weight for so long. It's time to set it down.